My name is Mackenzie Bennett, and at 27, I never expected to be sitting in a lawyer's office watching my stepmother, Elaine, destroy what remained of my relationship with my late father, Richard. The pain of losing him was still raw when she stood up with a triumphant smirk and announced, "She gets nothing." I made sure of it. But then, something unexpected happened. Benjamin, Dad's lawyer of 30 years, adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and started laughing. If you're watching this from a similar family situation, hit subscribe and stay tuned to find out why her face went completely white moments later. Growing up, it was just Dad and me against the world. My earliest memories are filled with him teaching me to ride a bike in our driveway, coaching my soccer team on weekends, and reading bedtime stories until I fell asleep. We were inseparable, especially after we lost Mom. My mother, Sophia, was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 12. For 2 years, our lives revolved around hospital visits, treatment schedules, and hoping against hope. I still remember how Dad would carry Mom to the car on days when she was too weak to walk, all while maintaining a brave face for me. When she passed away on a quiet spring morning, when I was 14, something broke inside both of us. Dad and I grieved together. There were nights when I'd hear him crying in their bedroom, and I'd silently join him. We'd sit on the edge of the bed, looking at photos of Mom, sharing memories through tears. Those painful moments bonded us in ways I never could have imagined. We became each other's support system, each other's family. Richard Bennett wasn't just my father. He was a self-made success story. Starting with a single fixer-upper property in his 20s, he built Bennett Real Estate Development into a company worth millions. He transformed abandoned buildings into thriving communities, always focusing on creating affordable housing alongside luxury developments. His business ethics earned him respect throughout the industry. Mackenzie, understanding money isn't about spending it. It's about growing it and using it responsibly, he told me one day while showing me the company books when I was 16. Those Sunday morning financial literacy lessons became our tradition. We'd sit at the kitchen table with stacks of pancakes, poring over investment reports and property valuations. While other teenagers slept in, I learned about capital gains, property taxes, and market fluctuations. When college application time came around, there was never any question about my path. I enrolled in business school with a focus on real estate finance, eager to follow in Dad's footsteps. During breaks, I'd intern at his company, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. He never gave me special treatment. If anything, he was harder on me than other employees. "You'll need to be twice as good to get half the credit in this industry," he'd remind me, especially after meetings where male clients would direct their questions to him, even when I was the one with the answers. Beyond business, we shared a passion for classic cars. Dad's prized possession was a 1967 Mustang that we restored together over 3 summers. Weekends would find us in the garage, covered in grease, arguing over engine parts and paint colors. The day we finished it, we took a road trip up the coast, the wind in our hair, singing along to his collection of 70s rock that he kept on actual cassette tapes. "Life isn't about the destination, Kenzie," he said as we watched the sunset from a cliffside viewpoint. "It's about enjoying the journey and who you share it with." After graduating with honors, I officially joined Bennett Real Estate Development. Dad started me in project management, where I could learn to handle contractors, budgets, and timelines. We still maintained our Sunday breakfast tradition, but now we discussed actual company projects and my growing responsibilities. He was gradually preparing me to take over one day, though neither of us imagined that day would come so soon. Looking back, those years after college were some of our best. I had my own apartment downtown but would often stay at the family home for our weekend projects. Dad and I were more than father and daughter. We were friends, business partners, and each other's biggest supporters. The company was thriving, expanding into new markets, and I was proving myself capable in my own right, earning respect from our employees and business associates. I was 25 when Dad surprised me by naming me Director of Operations. It was a significant promotion, one that I'd worked hard for but hadn't expected so soon. "You've earned this," he told me during the announcement at the company's quarterly meeting. "This isn't nepotism. This is recognition of talent. The pride in his eyes that day is something I'll never forget. I had no idea then that our comfortable world was about to be turned upside down by a woman named Elaine Fisher, who had become my stepmother and the beginning of the end-of-the-life Dad and I had built together. Dad met Elaine at the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala when I was 26. He had gone alone, as he usually did to these functions since Mom passed. According to what he told me later, Elaine had approached him during the silent auction, complimenting his generous bid on a luxury vacation package. She was striking, tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. She knew everything about real estate development, Dad said, a hint of admiration in his voice when he mentioned meeting her. We talked for hours about market trends and investment strategies. Elaine Fisher was 47, twice divorced, and moved in the same social circles as many of our business associates. She had a daughter named Cynthia who was about my age, 28, and according to Elaine's frequent mentions, working on her third graduate degree at an exclusive university abroad. What Elaine didn't volunteer, and what I discovered much later through a casual comment from one of Dad's friends, was that both her previous marriages had been to wealthy men significantly older than herself. When Dad asked if he could bring Elaine to our next Sunday breakfast, I was surprised but supportive. He hadn't dated much since Mom, and I was genuinely happy at the thought of him finding companionship. I cleaned my apartment meticulously that Sunday, prepared a gourmet breakfast spread, and genuinely tried to make a good impression. "Your father speaks so highly of you," Elaine said, air-kissing both my cheeks when they arrived. "I just know we're going to be the best of friends." That first meeting went well enough on the surface. Elaine was charming, asking questions about my role in the company and complimenting the framed photo of Dad and me at my college graduation. But there was something calculated in her interest, something that made me slightly uneasy. When Dad left to take a business call, her smile dimmed slightly, and she spent the rest of the time checking her phone. Their relationship progressed at a startling pace. Within weeks, Elaine was accompanying Dad to all business functions. Within 3 months, she had practically moved into our family home. And 6 months after their first meeting, Dad announced they were getting married in a small ceremony in the Bahamas. "Isn't this a bit sudden?" I asked him privately after the announcement. We were in his home office, where so many of our important conversations had taken place over the years. "When you get to my age, Kenzie, you don't want to waste time," he replied, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. "Elaine understands me, and she makes me feel young again." I pushed aside my reservations and stood beside Dad at the intimate beach wedding. Elaine was radiant in a simple white dress, and Dad looked at her with such adoration that I forced myself to believe this was a good thing. Cynthia flew in for the ceremony, a willowy blonde with her mother's features and a permanent expression of boredom. She barely acknowledged my attempts at conversation. The changes began subtly after they returned from their 2-week honeymoon in Europe. Our Sunday breakfasts became less frequent because Elaine had brunch commitments with her social circle. When I did come over, she would join us, steering conversations away from business to gossip about people I didn't know. "Richard, darling, you promised no work talk on weekends," she would say, placing a manicured hand on Dad's arm whenever he and I started discussing company matters. Dad's 60th birthday should have been a milestone celebration. I planned a surprise party with all his closest friends and business associates, but Elaine took over, changing the venue to an exclusive country club and revising the guest list to include dozens of her own acquaintances. The intimate celebration I had envisioned became a networking event where I barely got to speak to my own father. As months passed, Elaine's true nature revealed itself in countless small ways. The household staff that had been with us for years were gradually replaced with people of her choosing. Dad's favorite casual restaurants were deemed not suitable for someone of his stature. His wardrobe underwent a complete transformation. Even his office at home was redecorated to match Elaine's aesthetic, his fishing trophies, and our family photos relegated to storage. Then Cynthia moved back from Europe and into the family home. Suddenly, Dad was paying for her new car, her extensive shopping habits, and funding her lifestyle brand startup that never seemed to produce anything. When I expressed concern about Cynthia's obvious exploitation, Elaine was quick to defend her. Cynthia is family now, she told me with a cold smile. Richard is just being a good father figure to her, something she's never had. Surely you wouldn't begrudge that, having had his undivided attention for so many years. The worst moment came at a holiday dinner when I excused myself to use the bathroom and overheard Elaine on the phone in Dad's study. "Don't worry about the prenup," she was saying in a hushed tone. "I'm working on securing our future. Richard is wrapped around my finger, and his daughter won't be a problem much longer." I confronted Dad the next day at the office, the one place Elaine rarely visited. "I'm worried about you," I admitted. "Things are changing so fast, and Elaine seems to be isolating you from the people who have been in your life for years." Dad sighed, suddenly looking every bit his age. "I know Elaine can be difficult, Kenzie, but she makes me happy, and she's trying to fit into our lives. Please, for my sake, try to get along with her." He then took my hand and added, "No matter what happens, you will always be my daughter, and I will always take care of you. Trust me on that." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a site meeting at our newest development when my phone rang. It was Dad, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Kenzie, I need you to come to the hospital. I'm at Memorial, and, well, they found something." The something turned out to be stage 4 pancreatic cancer, already spread to his liver. The prognosis was grim from the start, 6 months at best, the doctors said in hushed tones outside his hospital room. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Dad was only 62, still vibrant and full of plans for the future. This couldn't be happening. The next few days were a blur of second opinions and treatment consultations. I took an immediate leave of absence from work to be with him, setting up a makeshift office in the hospital waiting room during his tests and procedures. Elaine was there, too, of course, suddenly transformed into the devoted wife, dramatically breaking down in front of medical staff and accepting condolences from friends with practiced grace. "Richard needs rest," became her mantra whenever I spent too much time alone with Dad. "The doctors say visitors tire him out." Somehow, this rule seemed to apply to me and Dad's oldest friends, but not to Elaine's social circle, who regularly dropped by with cameras for what looked suspiciously like photo opportunities with the ailing millionaire. Dad began aggressive chemotherapy, which ravaged his once strong body. I watched helplessly as he lost weight, his clothes hanging from his frame, his complexion taking on a yellowish tint. Yet, even in his weakened state, he insisted on being briefed about company matters, often asking me to bring financial reports to review during his more lucid moments. About 3 weeks after the diagnosis, during one of Elaine's rare absences to attend a spa appointment she couldn't possibly reschedule, Dad asked the nurse to close the door to his room. "Kenzie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to meet with Benjamin tomorrow." "My attorney," he clarified, though I knew exactly who Benjamin Williams was. He'd been Dad's lawyer and friend for 30 years. "Is everything okay?" I asked, alarmed by the urgency in his tone. "Just some estate matters I want to make sure are in order," he replied, attempting a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Promise me you'll go. And don't mention it to Elaine. Some things are better handled privately." The next day, I met Benjamin at his downtown office. He was a kind-faced man in his late 60s who had attended every major event in our family's life, including Mom's funeral and Dad's remarriage to Elaine. "Your father asked me to review these documents with you," Benjamin said, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. Inside was a stack of legal papers, trust documents, transfer of ownership forms, and powers of attorney. "I don't understand," I said, flipping through the complex legal terminology. Benjamin removed his glasses and cleaned them methodically. "Richard is placing the majority of his assets into an irrevocable trust, with you as the beneficiary. He's also transferring controlling interest in Bennett Development to you, effective immediately, though it won't be announced until later." By later, we both knew he meant after Dad was gone. "Does Elaine know about this?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "Elaine is provided for separately," Benjamin said diplomatically. "Your father has been very thorough in his planning." I signed where indicated, still trying to process what was happening. As I was leaving, Benjamin put a hand on my shoulder. Your father is a wise man, Mackenzie. He sees more than people give him credit for. When I returned to the hospital, Elaine was already there, giving instructions to the nursing staff about Dad's care. She eyed me suspiciously when I entered the room. Where have you been all morning? Your father was asking for you. Just handling some paperwork, I said vaguely, moving past her to take Dad's hand. He was asleep, his breathing shallow, but he squeezed my fingers slightly, letting me know he was aware of my presence. As the weeks passed, Dad's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer was aggressive, and the treatment seemed to cause more suffering than relief. Eventually, he decided to stop chemotherapy and transition to hospice care at home. This period was particularly difficult, as Elaine asserted complete control over the household. She implemented a strict schedule of when I could visit, claiming Dad needed consistency. Sometimes, I would arrive at the appointed time only to be told he was too tired for visitors that day. During one of my visits, I found Dad alone and more alert than he had been in days. He beckoned me closer to his bed. Everything is taken care of, he whispered, his once powerful voice now frail. Remember that. No matter what happens after I'm gone, trust Benjamin. And know that I've always seen clearly, even when I appeared blind. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but I nodded, fighting back tears. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Kenzie. More than anything in this world. It was the last real conversation we had. 3 days later, Richard Bennett slipped away peacefully in his sleep. I wasn't there. Elaine had told me not to come that evening, saying he was having a bad day. I received the call at 3 a.m., by which time she had already contacted the funeral home and begun making arrangements. The funeral was a lavish affair that felt nothing like what Dad would have wanted. Elaine insisted on a closed casket, an elaborate flower display that cost thousands, and a reception at the country club rather than at home. She gave a tearful eulogy about their magical but tragically short time together, while I was allocated a brief, 2-minute speaking slot near the beginning of the service, before most guests had even arrived. Throughout the reception, Elaine played the devastated widow to perfection, leaning on Cynthia for support and accepting condolences with damp eyes and trembling hands. Meanwhile, I stood awkwardly to the side, many of Dad's business associates not even aware I was his daughter, as Elaine failed to introduce me to anyone. 2 weeks later, we gathered in Benjamin's office for the reading of the will. Despite my conversation with Benjamin months earlier, I felt sick with anxiety. Something in Dad's final words to me suggested complications I couldn't yet understand, and Elaine's triumphant expression as we sat waiting for Benjamin to begin did nothing to ease my concerns. Benjamin's office had always reminded me of my father, traditional but not ostentatious, with leather-bound books lining the walls and a sense of quiet dependability. Today, however, the normally comforting space felt charged with tension. I sat alone on one side of the large conference table, while Elaine, Cynthia, and a sharp-faced man introduced as Gregory Palmer, Elaine's personal attorney, sat across from me in a united front. "Shall we begin?" Benjamin asked, arranging several documents before him. He looked exactly as he always had: gray suit, bow tie, wire-rimmed glasses, but there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "Yes, let's get this over with," Elaine replied, her voice dripping with false solemnity. She was dressed in head-to-toe black, though the diamond earrings sparkling beneath her perfectly styled hair somewhat undermined the grieving widow aesthetic. Benjamin nodded and began reading the formal introduction to my father's last will and testament. The legal language washed over me as I stared at a family photo on Benjamin's credenza, Dad and me at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. To my loyal housekeeper, Margaret Wilson, I leave the sum of $50,000 in recognition of her years of service, Benjamin read, bringing my attention back to the proceedings. Similar bequests followed to Dad's driver, his personal assistant, his favorite charities, and a few close friends. With each name that wasn't mine, Elaine's smile grew, and she exchanged knowing looks with Cynthia, who was scrolling through her phone under the table, barely paying attention. To my beloved wife, Elaine Bennett, Benjamin continued, and Elaine sat up straighter, adjusting her designer morning outfit. But before he could continue, she interrupted him. Actually, Benjamin, before you go on, I think we should clarify something for Mackenzie's benefit, Elaine said, her voice sickly sweet. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings. Benjamin looked up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Mrs. Bennett, perhaps we should complete the reading first. No, I think this needs to be said, Elaine insisted, turning to face me directly. Mackenzie, I know you've been expecting to inherit your father's company and fortune. I just want you to know that Richard and I discussed this at length during his illness, and he came to realize that leaving everything to me would be the wisest choice. I'll be taking over Bennett Development, of course. I sat frozen, unsure how to respond to this bizarre pronouncement. Benjamin removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose in what appeared to be deepening irritation. You see, Elaine continued, gaining momentum, your father finally understood that you simply aren't ready for such responsibility. He was protecting you, really. Cynthia looked up from her phone long enough to add, Mom's going to implement all the changes your dad was too sentimental to make. The company will be so much more profitable once we sell off those ridiculous affordable housing projects. I turned to Benjamin, who was watching the scene with an increasingly strange expression. Is this true? I asked, my voice barely audible. Before he could answer, Elaine stood up dramatically, unable to contain herself any longer. She gets nothing. I made sure of it, she declared triumphantly. The will was changed during Richard's final months. Isn't that right, Gregory? Her lawyer nodded smoothly. I personally oversaw the new documents. Very standard procedure when there's a new spouse involved. It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Could Dad really have betrayed me like this? After all our years together, after the private meeting with Benjamin, after his final assurances that everything was taken care of? That's when I noticed something odd. Benjamin Williams, my father's serious, professional attorney of 3 decades, was laughing. It started as a small chuckle, barely perceptible, but grew until he was removing his glasses to wipe his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, composing himself. But Mrs. Bennett, with all due respect, you seem to be laboring under a significant misunderstanding. Elaine's triumphant expression faltered. What are you talking about? The will. The will is actually quite generous to you, Benjamin interrupted, putting his glasses back on and shuffling his papers. You receive the family home in Greenwich, its contents, and a monthly stipend of $20,000 for the remainder of your life. Yes, exactly, Elaine said. And the company. Ma'am, Benjamin said, his voice suddenly stern, you can't change a trust that already transferred $20 million and controlling interest in Bennett Development to Mackenzie last year. An irrevocable trust, I might add, that was established long before your husband's diagnosis. The color drained from Elaine's face so dramatically that for a moment, I thought she might faint. That's impossible, she whispered. I assure you, it's not only possible, it's legally binding, Benjamin replied, sliding a document across the table. Here is a copy of the trust agreement, signed by Richard and properly notarized 11 months ago. Mackenzie has been the majority shareholder of Bennett Development for quite some time now. Cynthia grabbed the document, her eyes widening as she scanned it. Mom, she said uncertainly. Elaine snatched the papers from her daughter's hands, her composure cracking completely as she flipped through the pages. This can't be legal. Richard was manipulated. She manipulated him. She jabbed a finger in my direction. Mrs. Bennett, Benjamin said calmly, I personally oversaw this transfer. Richard was in excellent health and of sound mind when he made these arrangements. Standard procedure, as your attorney might confirm, when there's a new spouse involved. The deliberate echo of Gregory's earlier words wasn't lost on anyone. Elaine's lawyer suddenly seemed very interested in his own paperwork, avoiding his client's desperate glances. But he changed the will. Elaine insisted, her voice rising hysterically. We went to a lawyer's office. He signed new documents. Yes, Richard did execute a new will after your marriage, Benjamin acknowledged. But a will can only control assets that are in the estate at the time of death. The trust assets were already legally Mackenzie's. They were no longer his to bequeath to anyone. I sat in stunned silence as the reality of the situation dawned on me. Dad hadn't betrayed me. He had protected me and the company we'd built together from exactly this scenario. Furthermore, Benjamin continued, seemingly enjoying himself now as the executor of Richard's estate. I feel obligated to mention that there are several irregularities in the new will you're referring to. Richard's signature appears shaky in a way inconsistent with his earlier documents, even accounting for his illness. Elaine's face, already pale, now went completely white. Are you accusing me of something? I'm simply stating facts, Mrs. Bennet. Facts that would certainly come under scrutiny should you choose to contest the existing legal arrangements. Cynthia, finally grasping the situation, let out a wail of indignation. This is totally unfair. We deserve that money way more than she does. We had plans. I'm sure you did, Benjamin replied dryly. However, Richard's wishes were quite clear. Now, shall we continue with the reading of the will to address the remaining assets? As Benjamin resumed reading, I sat in a daze, processing what had just happened. Across the table, Elaine had collapsed back into her chair, her perfect facade shattered, while Cynthia continued to protest loudly about the unfairness of it all. Dad had known. Somehow, he had seen through Elaine's act and taken steps to protect not just me, but his company and legacy. The mix of vindication and grief was overwhelming: joy that he hadn't betrayed me, but profound sadness that he had recognized the true nature of his new wife and kept that burden to himself. As the meeting concluded, Benjamin asked me to stay behind. Once the others had left, Elaine storming out with threats of further legal action, Cynthia trailing behind her like a petulant shadow, he handed me an envelope. "Your father asked me to give you this privately," he said. "I think you'll find it explains a great deal." Inside was a handwritten letter from Dad, dated just after his diagnosis. As I read his familiar handwriting, tears streamed down my face. He had known exactly what Elaine was planning and had already taken steps to counter it. The letter ended with words that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. "I'm sorry I won't be there to see you lead the company into the future, Kenzie, but know that I made these arrangements not out of lack of trust in Elaine, but because of my complete trust in you. You have always been my greatest achievement, far beyond any building I've ever constructed. I love you, Pumpkin. Make me proud." As I left Benjamin's office that day, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders alongside the grief that would take much longer to process. But I also felt something unexpected, a sense of my father still watching over me, still guiding me, even now. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Elaine and a barrage of text messages ranging from tearful apologies to thinly veiled threats. I ignored them all and headed to the Bennett development offices. As the majority shareholder and newly confirmed president of the company, I had responsibilities to attend to, regardless of personal drama. Walking through the glass doors bearing my father's name, our name, felt surreal. The receptionist, Jennifer, did a double take when she saw me. Word of yesterday's will reading hadn't spread yet, but everyone knew I'd been absent during Dad's final days, thanks to Elaine's interference. "Good morning, Jennifer," I said, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Could you please ask the executive team to gather in the main conference room in 30 minutes? As she made the calls, I continued to Dad's corner office, my office now. It remained exactly as he had left it, from the scale models of our major developments to the family photos on his desk. I ran my fingers over his leather chair, remembering all the times I'd sat across from him in this room, learning, arguing, growing. When the executive team assembled, their faces showed a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty. These were people who had known me for years, who had watched me work my way up from intern to director, but who now wondered what my leadership would mean for their future. "As you all know," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "My father established a clear succession plan for Bennett Development. I'm here to assure you that the company will continue operating according to his vision, our vision of responsible development that benefits communities while maintaining profitability." I outlined immediate priorities and addressed concerns about ongoing projects. By the end of the meeting, I could see the tension easing from most faces. We had work to do, and focusing on that work would be the best way to honor Dad's legacy. As the room cleared, Michael Donovan, Dad's longtime business partner and head of acquisitions, lingered behind. In his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, Michael had been a fixture in my life almost as long as Benjamin. "Your father would be proud," he said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. And for what it's worth, he knew exactly what he was doing with Elaine. I looked up surprised. "You knew?" Michael nodded grimly. About 4 months after they married, Elaine approached me privately, asking detailed questions about the company structure, ownership percentages, and your role. She framed it as wanting to understand the family business better, but the questions were too specific, too focused on financial control. "Did you tell Dad?" I asked. "I did. He thanked me for the information and said he'd handle it." A week later, he mentioned meeting with Benjamin about updating some legal matters. I didn't know the details until yesterday when Benjamin called me. This confirmation that Dad had seen through Elaine's facade so early in their marriage was both comforting and heartbreaking. He had spent his final years with a woman he knew was only after his money. Why did he stay with her? I whispered, asking the question that had been haunting me. Michael's expression softened. I asked him that once, very carefully. He said, "At my age, sometimes known complications are preferable to starting over. Besides, I've already had the love of my life with Sophia. Lightning doesn't strike twice." But I think he also wanted to protect you from the fallout of a messy divorce. The following days brought a flurry of legal notices as Elaine made good on her threats to contest everything. Her lawyer filed claims of undue influence, diminished capacity, and even elder abuse against me. Each accusation hurt more than the last, painting a picture of me as a manipulative daughter who had taken advantage of a dying man. Benjamin remained unruffled. "These claims have no merit," he assured me during one of our many meetings. "We have extensive documentation of your father's mental competence, including videos of board meetings months after the trust was established, and the timing works against Elaine. The trust was created well before his diagnosis." Still, the legal barrage took its toll. I found myself unable to sleep, replaying conversations with Dad, wondering if I had missed signs of his unhappiness. Rachel Thompson, my best friend since college, finally intervened, showing up at my apartment with takeout and a firm directive. "You're staying with me for a few days," she announced, already packing a bag for me. "This empty apartment with nothing but legal papers and your thoughts isn't healthy." Rachel's guest room became my sanctuary as the battle with Elaine intensified. Each morning, I'd go to the office, leading the company through the transition while fielding calls from Benjamin about Elaine's latest maneuvers. Each evening, I'd return to Rachel's warm household, where her husband, Jake, and their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, provided a much-needed reminder of what family should feel like. A month into the legal proceedings, Benjamin called with unexpected news. "We found something interesting while preparing our response to Elaine's latest filing," he said, his voice conveying rare excitement. "Your father kept detailed journals for years. The most recent volumes document his concerns about Elaine's behavior, starting just months into their marriage. The journals were a revelation. Dad had recorded everything: Elaine's gradual isolation tactics, her probing questions about his finances, her attempts to turn him against me. He noted dates when she brought up changing his will and his strategic agreement to consider it, while he quietly secured his actual wishes through the trust. These are enormously helpful," Benjamin said. "They establish a pattern and his state of mind. I'd like to submit them as evidence." I hesitated, knowing that making the journals public would expose Dad's private thoughts and his awareness of his failing marriage. Would he want that? Then I remembered his final message to me: "Make me proud." Submit them, I decided. Dad valued truth above all else. The journals changed everything. Faced with Richard Bennett's own words, Elaine's claims of manipulation fell apart. Her lawyer requested a private meeting, where he grudgingly proposed a settlement. Elaine would drop all claims in exchange for keeping the house and a modest increase to her monthly allowance. "Take it," Benjamin advised. "It's a small price for ending this cleanly." I agreed, with one non-negotiable condition: a complete non-disclosure agreement. Elaine would never speak publicly about Dad, me, or the company. Our family's privacy was worth far more than the financial concessions. 3 months after Dad's death, the legal battle ended with a whimper rather than a bang. Elaine signed the settlement papers without meeting my eyes, Cynthia sulking beside her as they left Benjamin's office for the last time. I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, certainly, but also an unexpected pity. How empty must a life be if its primary goal is claiming another person's achievements? That evening, I drove to the cemetery with a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch and 2 glasses. Sitting beside his headstone as the sun set, I poured us each a measure. "We won, Dad," I said to the quiet air. "Though I suppose you knew we would all along." I could almost hear his laugh on the gentle breeze, could almost see him shaking his head at Elaine's transparent schemes. For the first time since his diagnosis, I found myself smiling when thinking of him, remembering his strength rather than his suffering. As darkness fell, I made him a promise. "I'll run the company the way we planned, profitable, yes, but never at the expense of our values. Your legacy is safe with me." I left his glass of scotch beside the headstone and took mine with me, ready to face whatever came next. The following months brought challenges I never anticipated. Running Bennett Development demanded every ounce of my business acumen and then some. Dad had made it look effortless, but now I understood the weight he'd carried: the responsibility for hundreds of employees, millions in investments, and communities counting on our projects. Some days, I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to call him for advice before remembering he was gone. Those moments hit like physical blows, leaving me breathless and disoriented. Grief, I was learning, doesn't progress in a straight line but circles back when least expected. The settlement with Elaine should have ended our troubles, but she found ways to create complications. Despite the non-disclosure agreement, she refused to vacate the family home by the agreed date, necessitating further legal action. She accidentally took personal items belonging to my mother that held tremendous sentimental value. Each incident required Benjamin's intervention and drained emotional energy I couldn't afford to spare. "She's testing boundaries," Rachel observed during one of our weekly dinners. "She lost the war but still wants to win some battles." Rachel had become my rock through this period. When work overwhelmed me, she'd show up with coffee and perspective. When grief ambushed me, she'd sit in silence, offering presence instead of platitudes. On the rare occasions when I doubted my abilities to fill Dad's shoes, she'd remind me of all the times I'd already proven myself capable. "Your father didn't just hand you the company because you're his daughter," she pointed out one evening as we reviewed quarterly projections in my living room. "He handed it to you because you're Mackenzie Bennett, and he knew exactly how formidable that makes you." Those words became my mantra during difficult meetings and sleepless nights. I was my father's daughter, yes, but also my own person, with my own strengths. Gradually, I began making careful changes to our operations, implementing technologies Dad had been hesitant about, restructuring departments for greater efficiency, pursuing new markets he'd considered but never entered. For months after settling with Elaine, we broke ground on a project that was entirely mine: a mixed-use development incorporating affordable housing, retail space, and a community center in a historically underserved neighborhood. Standing at the ceremony with hard hat and ceremonial shovel, I felt a strange, dual sensation: pride in my own vision and a bittersweet wish that Dad could see it. That afternoon, returning to the office flushed with success, I found Michael waiting with an unexpected update. "Elaine's filed another suit," he said without preamble. "She's claiming your father made verbal promises about the company that supersede the trust documents." My immediate reaction was exhaustion rather than anger. "Benjamin said this might happen. Her monthly allowance probably isn't covering her lifestyle." "There's more," Michael continued, his expression grave. "She's subpoenaed company records going back 5 years, claiming she needs to investigate financial irregularities during your tenure as operations director." This was a new low, an attack not just on my inheritance, but on my professional integrity and Dad's management. For the first time since his death, I felt a white-hot anger that burned through the grief and fatigue. "She wants to play hardball?" Fine. No more gentle handling, I decided. Benjamin has been too nice because of Dad's memory. Call him and tell him the gloves are off. What followed was the most difficult period since Dad's diagnosis. Elaine's fishing expedition meant our legal team had to compile thousands of documents, disrupting operations and creating a cloud of suspicion that affected morale. Meanwhile, she gave interviews to business publications, carefully skirting the NDA while implying the company was in inexperienced hands. The pressure might have broken me if not for an unexpected discovery. While searching for documents responsive to Elaine's subpoenas, our IT director found a folder of video files on Dad's private server, recordings of our Sunday morning business discussions going back years. Watching them was both painful and illuminating. There I was at 22, earnestly arguing with Dad about market projections. At 24, confidently presenting acquisition strategies he ultimately adopted. At 26, standing my ground during a disagreement about a risky investment that I'd been right about in the end. He was documenting your growth, Benjamin observed when I showed him the videos, and inadvertently creating a record of your qualifications to run the company. The videos became evidence in our countersuit against Elaine, along with performance reviews, successful projects I'd led, and testimonials from long-term employees and business partners. We also filed for sanctions based on her frivolous claims and violation of the settlement agreement's spirit. 6 weeks later, we found ourselves in court. I sat beside Benjamin at the plaintiff's table, wearing one of Dad's cufflinks on a chain around my neck like a talisman. Across the aisle, Elaine looked expensively aggrieved in another black outfit, her lawyer shuffling papers importantly. Judge Harriet Montgomery, a stern woman in her 60s, made it clear from the outset that she had thoroughly reviewed the case file. I see a pattern of claims that appear designed to harass rather than seek legitimate legal remedy, she noted, looking directly at Elaine's counsel. I'm particularly troubled by allegations of financial impropriety without any supporting evidence. Over the next 3 hours, Benjamin methodically dismantled Elaine's claims, presenting the trust documents, Dad's journals, and video evidence of my qualifications. Michael testified about Elaine's early inquiries into company finances, and 2 former household staff members described overhearing her discussing plans to take control once Dad was gone. The turning point came when Elaine took the stand and Judge Montgomery questioned her directly about her previous marriages. Under oath, she was forced to admit that both had been to wealthy, older men, both had ended in divorce settlements, and both ex-husbands had subsequently revised their estate plans to limit her claims. So this is, in fact, the 3rd time you've challenged an estate plan that didn't meet your expectations? The judge asked. Elaine's composure finally cracked. They all promised me security. Richard said I'd be taken care of. That ungrateful daughter of his already had everything, his love, his time, his trust. What did I get for making his final years happy? A house and a pittance. The courtroom fell silent. In her outburst, Elaine had revealed her true motivations more clearly than any evidence could have. Judge Montgomery's expression hardened. This case is dismissed with prejudice, she declared. Furthermore, I'm granting the defendant's motion for sanctions. Mrs. Bennett, this court finds your claims without merit and your litigation tactics abusive. You will pay the defendant's legal fees in full, and I'm issuing a restraining order barring you from any further contact with Ms. Bennett or Bennett Development employees. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by our legal team, I felt lightheaded with relief. It's over, Benjamin said, squeezing my shoulder. Really over this time. What will she do now? I asked, watching Elaine storm to a waiting car, ignoring reporters' questions. That's not your concern anymore, he replied wisely. You have a company to run and a life to live. Richard wouldn't want you to waste another minute on her. He was right, of course. That evening, I returned to the office and called an impromptu gathering of department heads. The legal distractions are behind us, I announced. From now on, we focus exclusively on what Bennett Development does best, building the future. As fall turned to winter, I slowly found my rhythm as the company's leader. Projects moved forward, profits remained strong, and gradually the shadow of scandal lifted. I established my own Sunday tradition, Breakfast at my apartment followed by strategic planning, honoring Dad's methods while making them my own. One cold December morning, a year after Dad's diagnosis, I visited his grave with a portfolio containing plans for our newest development, Bennett Community Plaza, named in his honor. Sitting on the cold ground, I walked through the plans as if he were there listening, pointing out features I knew he would appreciate and explaining changes I'd made to his original concept. "I think I understand now why you handled Elaine the way you did," I told him as I packed up to leave. "You could have divorced her, exposed her, fought publicly. Instead, you quietly put protections in place and carried on. You chose the path that would cause least disruption to the company and to me." A light snow began falling, dusting the headstone with white. "I'm trying to lead with the same wisdom," I continued, "making decisions not just for today's benefit, but for their long-term impact. I'm not there yet, but I'm learning." As I walked back to my car, phone already buzzing with messages requiring attention, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The anger and betrayal that had driven me through the legal battles had burned away, leaving something stronger in its place: confidence in my own abilities and a deeper appreciation for my father's foresight. Bennett Development was mine now, to lead according to my own vision while honoring its foundations. The company, like me, would carry Richard Bennett's legacy forward while writing its own future. 6 months after winning the final legal battle against Elaine, I stood on the roof of our newest completed project, a 16-story mixed-use building that had been Dad's last acquisition and my first completed development as CEO. The spring breeze ruffled my hair as I looked out over the city's skyline, recognizing the Bennett family's influence on its shape. Buildings we had developed dotted the landscape, each representing a piece of our legacy. Bennett Development was thriving under my leadership. The transition had been bumpy at times, with a few longtime executives choosing to retire rather than adjust to new management, but the team we had now was stronger, a blend of Dad's trusted associates and fresh talent I'd brought in to modernize our approach. After months of consideration, I had made one significant change to our business model, establishing the Richard Bennett Foundation with a substantial initial endowment. The foundation focused on 2 areas Dad had cared deeply about: cancer research and affordable housing initiatives. Michael had agreed to head the foundation upon his retirement from active company management, bringing his decades of experience to this new venture. "Your father would have loved this," he told me at the foundation's launch event. Using the fruits of his success to help others. That's exactly what he believed wealth was for. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dad's money was now doing precisely what Elaine and Cynthia had feared, being wasted on people they deemed undeserving. But I knew Dad would see it differently. He had built his fortune from nothing and always remembered the communities that supported his early ventures. This was simply completing the circle. Life had settled into a new normal. I had finally moved out of my downtown apartment into a house of my own, not as grand as the family home Elaine still occupied, but a place that reflected my personality and needs. Rachel and her family were frequent visitors, filling the space with the warmth and laughter I'd missed since Dad's passing. On a personal level, I was slowly learning to balance work with other aspects of life, something Dad had always encouraged but hadn't always practiced himself. I joined a rowing club, rekindling a passion from my college days, and had even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious had developed yet. The weight of grief still visited occasionally, but it no longer dominated my days. Then came an unexpected encounter that tested my newfound equilibrium. I was leaving a lunch meeting at Westfield's, an upscale restaurant downtown, when I literally bumped into Elaine in the lobby. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the courtroom, almost a year ago. Time had not been kind to her. Though still expensively dressed, she looked older, the carefully maintained facade showing cracks. For a moment, we both froze, equally startled by the unexpected meeting. "Mackenzie," she finally said, her voice lacking its former confidence. "Elaine," I replied neutrally. "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you were moving to Palm Beach." This information had come through the grapevine. Apparently, she had listed the Greenwich house for sale. "Plans change," she said vaguely, adjusting her designer bag. "The Florida market isn't as welcoming as I'd hoped." Translation: she couldn't afford the lifestyle she wanted there on her settlement. An awkward silence fell between us. In the past, this encounter would have filled me with anger or anxiety. Now, looking at the woman who had caused so much pain during Dad's final days, I felt something unexpected: pity. "How is Cynthia?" I asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine interest. Elaine's expression tightened. "She's in Europe. Indefinitely." Another translation: the gravy train had ended, and Cynthia had moved on to seek greener pastures. Like mother, like daughter. "Well, I should go," I said, stepping toward the door. "I have a meeting." Elaine nodded, but as I passed her, she spoke again. "He did love you, you know. More than anything." I turned back, studying her face for signs of manipulation or bitterness, but found only resignation. "I know," I replied. "That was never in question." "He saw through me from the beginning, didn't he?" she asked softly. The question caught me off guard with its honesty. "Yes," I admitted. "But he chose to stay anyway." "Why?" The words seemed torn from her, a question she'd perhaps been asking herself since the will reading. I considered several responses before settling on the truth. "I think he was tired of being alone. And he decided the arrangement was worth the cost." Dad was always good at calculating value. Elaine flinched slightly but nodded. "For what it's worth, I did care for him. In my way." "I hope that's true," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Goodbye, Elaine." Walking away, I felt a sense of closure that legal victories hadn't provided. The encounter had confirmed what I'd gradually come to understand, that Elaine's scheming had harmed her far more than it had harmed me. She had spent her life chasing security through others rather than building something of her own, and now she was left with nothing but a monthly allowance and fading beauty. That evening, I called Benjamin to let him know about the encounter. "She's selling the house," I told him. Apparently, Florida didn't work out. "I'm not surprised," he replied. "The housing market is down, and that property has significant maintenance costs. Your father knew the house would eventually become more burden than benefit to her. He thought of everything, didn't he?" I mused. "Richard was always several moves ahead," Benjamin agreed. "But his greatest foresight was recognizing your potential. The trust wasn't just about protecting assets from Elaine. It was about ensuring you had the resources and authority to fulfill your capabilities." The observation stayed with me in the days that followed. Dad's final gift hadn't been the money or the company. It had been his confidence in me. By placing Bennett Development in my hands before circumstances forced the issue, he had given me the greatest possible vote of confidence. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I organized a small gathering at his favorite spot in Greenwich Point Park, a bench overlooking the Long Island Sound where he'd often come to think through big decisions. Michael was there along with Benjamin, Rachel, and her family, and a few of Dad's oldest friends. We shared memories and raised glasses of his favorite scotch as the sun set over the water. "To Richard," Benjamin toasted, "who built not just buildings, but people." "To Dad," I added, "who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in impact." Later, as the others drifted toward the parking lot, I lingered on the bench, watching the play of fading light on water. The past 18 months had transformed me in ways I was still discovering. I had learned that grief and growth could coexist, that betrayal could lead to wisdom, and that sometimes the most important inheritance isn't material at all. Bennett Development continued to evolve under my leadership. We had recently broken ground on our most ambitious project yet, a sustainable urban community incorporating cutting-edge environmental technology with accessible price points. The Richard Bennett Foundation was funding scholarships for students pursuing careers in sustainable architecture and construction. And I had finally restored Dad's beloved Mustang, taking it for Sunday drives along the coast where we had once traveled together. Life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of doubt, still missed Dad's guidance, still faced challenges in an industry that sometimes struggled to take a young woman seriously. But I had found my footing and my voice. More importantly, I had discovered a truth that Dad had known all along, that the most valuable legacy isn't what we leave behind, but what we build in others. As I walked back to my car in the gathering dusk, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. The company was secure, Dad's memory was honored, and I was not just surviving, but thriving, building my own path while respecting the foundations he had laid.